Well, welcome everybody. Thanks, Sam, for coming and
Pleasure.
doing your little turn for us.
We've decided tonight's going to be a face-off between Bourne and Bond. let the action begin.
Oh my God. Well, let's just orientate ourselves. We had lunch a couple of years ago
Yeah.
in New York, and you said, "What the fuck's the story with this Bond? What do you think?" So tell me, what led you to do it? What was the sort of thinking?
Well, Paul and I met in, I think you were doing a junket for Green Zone?
I was, yep.
And I thought, it was on the cards, Bond was on the cards, and I thought I should talk to someone who's actually taken on one of these enormous juggernauts. And you were incredibly inspiring, actually, because you just said, you just got to you do it. You'd be crazy not to do it. It'll shake you up. It'll change the way you do things, but also it'll wake you up, and it'll be fun. But you've got to throw yourself right into the middle of it. At least that's the message I got from you.
Right. Actually, I said, don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. But you see, he likes a glass, Paul. So he was actually completely legless when he told me. For me, it was exactly that. Really, at the end of the day, I needed to try and find a way to shake myself out of some of the habits I got into, and I wanted a challenge, and I wanted to be scared again by things that I didn't know how they worked entirely. I wanted to take on action. I was aware that there would be a sense that it was an unexpected choice for me to do it, and that kind of got me going a bit. It was a chance to come back to England. I hadn't made a movie in England. I'm English, obviously, and I'd made 5, more by accident than design in a way, 5 American pictures back to back, really. And I wanted to work with Daniel again, and I wanted to work with Judi Dench again, and so all of those things sort of, it just felt like the right timing. And you know as well as anyone that so much of this business is about timing. 5 years earlier, and I never would have done it. I wouldn't have even contemplated it, weirdly. And so saying nothing about the movies or the franchise, it just wouldn't have been what I wanted to do at the time. And it's something I've already mentioned in various interviews that that Daniel asked me whether he thought it was a good idea for him to play Bond, and I said no. I thought he would be, it would be a disaster for his career, and he will always be known as Bond, and then also in my head I just thought by that time I simply equated Bond with Pierce and with Roger Moore and with a kind of urbane, a kind of sense of pastiche, self-referential gagginess that seemed to be completely unlike Daniel and Daniel's persona, Daniel's energy and his weird rage and his excitement as an actor. And then about 30 seconds into Casino Royale, I thought I was completely wrong. And by the way, I can say this over and over again, without Casino Royale and without the work that Martin Campbell and Daniel did on that movie, this movie that we made is completely impossible. It's interesting talking to Paul outside because we were talking about the first Bourne movie and how, I feel I've got a lot of credit for some of the stuff that Martin did in Casino Royale because really he did the hard job because he took away pastiche, he took away all the things I just talked about, and he brought back a character that you cared about in a different way. And he leveled the playing field, he took it back to sea level, as it were, and then made it possible for us to reintroduce Q, and now you've seen it, Moneypenny, and some of the humour exactly that had been there, but now kind of we found it again on Daniel's terms, really, right. and on mine, and that. So all of those things went into the choice to do it.
And talk about, because the thing with these films is always the screenplay, and so many of these big franchise movies are made arse about tit. They start by saying, we are releasing this movie next July, off you go.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I mean, it's funny you mention that because
you obviously managed to get...
Well, I wasn't offered the Avengers movie, but I got one of those submission letters from CAA, And it wasn't a script, it was an enormous stack it was like just a huge comic book, lots of comic books. And the geek in me thought, oh, good, comics, I can read them on the loo. But it said, the cover sheet said, Marvel's The Avengers will be released May the 3rd, 2012. And then it described the movie. The first sentence of the cover sheet was the release date. Before it said anything, I'm not a Marvel fan, so I didn't know what the Avengers were. And then I gathered from the material that it was all of them together. But it's interesting that so often it's the case that Paul says that you're told when the movie's coming out before you're told what it actually is. It's got to that point now. We had a great stroke of luck on this movie, which is that in the middle of pre-production, effectively, before I was even announced as director, the whole of MGM went into bankruptcy, and the movie was postponed indefinitely, as you might have read if you're interested in following these things. And so we had a 9-month hiatus, and although we were not supposed to legally work on the movie, actually that's when we worked on the script.
Right.
And it's depressing if you're a studio or a producer who wants to make a movie within a year, but the truth is it takes a year to write a good script, and then you can start pre-production, and that's what it took us on this. And there is no way, as Paul says, that without Rob and Neil, and particularly John Logan, we would have had anything like the movie that we have. It was entirely, the blueprint was all on the page, and everything that I think is unusual in the film, for example, Javier's performance, it was all down there on paper, and he took it then, he could take it, he had a solid launching pad to the next level. But without those words, it's a very verbal character, he would have been nowhere. And by the way, he wouldn't have said yes to it anyway. I mean, one of the reasons the cast is so good is because we had a script that we could actually send them, and they thought, yeah, I'll play that. Rafe thought, I'll have a go at that,
So you had this triangle at the heart of the film.
Yes. I mean, I was very conscious because, again, you've seen it now, so I can talk about this, but I've not been able really to talk about the fact that the one idea that we were very set on from the very beginning was that this was M's last film, M was going to die. So that we knew we were building to that moment throughout. So everything in it was really, in a sense, the secret film, as it were, was a meditation on death and loss. That was the given. Now we understand, and aging. Now we understand that the story is really about aging, about the old and the new guard coming in under the old, and where Bond sits in that. Is he too old? Is he finished? Is he done? Or is he going to be replaced in the centre of it again? Now we can start reintroducing the things that you expect from a Bond movie. Yes, of course there's going to be action sequences, of course there's going to be girls, locations, a villain, what have you, but they're all in support of this one story. And so that was the centre of it from the beginning, was, okay, Judy's going to die, there's going to have to be a new M. It's much more interesting to introduce a new M if we don't see it coming, so we have to introduce him as a potentially dark figure, so it needs an actor skilled enough to be able to transform gradually an audience's perception of the character, scene by scene as the movie progresses, until at the end, we hope, you're pleased that it's him. And so, although Rafe every day was like, they're going to hate me. They're going to absolutely hate me. I'm the person responsible for Judy. And it's like, no. I'm the person responsible for Judy. You're okay. You're just going to, So, but I think he was also terrified. Rafe was terrified that he was going to. I called him up and said, "Can I take you out to lunch? I need to talk to you about the Bond movie." And he went, "Okay." And I think he thought, "I can't be another villain. I've been Voldemort for a decade." So I think he was relieved when I said it's M. And surprised as well. So everything hung off that central idea. And once we determined that, the question was how far we could push the relationship between Bond and M, and how much he would show her of himself. Because it seems to me the strength of Bond as a character is how little he explains, how little he shows. And there's only really one person who understands.
How little you know about him.
His actual personal history, exactly. There's only one person who sees, as it were, behind the curtain, and that's M. And so she will see things in this movie that no one else will see, and then she'll die. And take those secrets with her, as it were. Right. And that always seemed to me a very beautiful idea, so that's what we went for.
And talk a bit about what Daniel was doing, because he looked fantastic, didn't he? He looked this sort of ravaged man, it was it was an older Bond. It wasn't the kind of great glamorous Bond of the
Yeah, I mean, it's
past.
it's a tough ask, I think, I mean, I made it very clear to him at the beginning where I said, look, you know, if the movie is about aging and is about the old and the new, you know, you have to play your own age. You have to be 42 or whatever it is, 43. And you also have to be prepared to stand there while people go, you're finished, you're too old, you know, give up, you know, look at you, it's a young man's game, your knees must be killing you. I mean, there's 20 lines in the movie about, you know, stop already. What are you doing? You're not a superhero, you know. And that was the pleasure of it, because of course you know, fundamentally, he's going to return. He's going to return stronger than ever. But only when he's been tested to the limit, pushed past the point that he appears to have no chance of returning, will he then return. And that's the fun of it. I mean, I felt like we could push, you know, we are in a universe, thanks in large part to the Bourne movies, Paul, and also The Dark Knight, and also, to a degree, other dark, as it were, character-driven tentpole movies, even movies like X-Men, in which the hero is an anti-hero. I mean, it's fundamentally a flawed character, a complex individual who has many facets. Some of them are negative, and some of them are positive. Now, I didn't invent that. The irony is Fleming invented that. You know, none of us did. But the original anti-hero is there in the books. But then somehow, somewhere in the middle of the movie franchise, that character got airbrushed a little bit. And some of the darker, shadier parts of that very three-dimensional character that Fleming created, full of self-loathing and cynicism and depressions and all sorts of other, became a sort of constant. In a way, Bond became the glue that linked together lots of glamorous locations and girls, but really was an unchanging figure.
And the thing about the movie star in those franchises, it's critical that he puts his weight behind those interpretations as opposed to easier ones.
Yes,
you know,
I mean, absolutely.
That's absolutely critical, I think.
I think
the politics of franchise movie.
And
making.
you had with Matt a great actor capable of doing those things, but also someone who said, look, I'm not interested in doing it unless it is that. You know, but you've got a strange world now where, you know, the movies that I've made up to this point, I cannot make at the moment. I can't make these films. I can't make a $50-60 million film. They don't exist anymore on the whole. You either make them for, I mean, it's very interesting, there's a really good movie out at the moment, Denzel Washington movie called Flight. You know, Denzel, massive movie star, Bob Zemeckis, huge Oscar-winning director, made it for $30 million because that's the most they were allowed to spend on it. You know, so that's the world that's the bottom end, as it were, the cheaper end of the market. Or there's $200 million, $180 million huge franchise movies. There's nothing in between. And so what I think you see is a migration in both directions from people whose natural place is the serious middle range budget movie, either are going to the smaller movies, making independent movies, which is what I've done for the last 8 years, or going in the other direction and trying to bring with them some of the things that they expect from the movies that they used to make. And one of them is a hero that's more interesting than simply a two-dimensional character. But of course, what Paul says is right. If Daniel doesn't want to do that, you know, then he doesn't even employ a director like me. It all comes from him in the end. I mean, that's where and of course, Barbara and Michael, the producers, who are remarkable in their willingness to hand over, you know, the fundamental sort of the mainspring of the film to a filmmaker, and then say to them, look, as they said to me, we don't want a Bond movie, we want your Bond movie. You know, we want to see what you want to say about it. We will tell you if you've gone too far in one direction. Mm-hmm. But so all the big things, obviously I check. I mean, obviously, you know, you have to be happy to have Q back, and as a young man, are you okay with that? You're okay with, and are you okay with me pushing Daniel way out to the edge of what he might look like, not looking glamorous always?
And they said, yeah. That was the great strength, I think. Yeah. It was a very British movie, I thought.
Good, I'm glad you thought that.
I mean, because talk a bit about
I thought I might have forgotten what it was like to be British.
No, you could feel it had a sort of classic quality.
Right. Well, it was very influenced. I mean,
Get Carter,
exactly.
Crest File.
Yeah.
There was a bit of a western at the end there.
Yeah.
You know.
you just took away my best lines there. I was about to yeah, get Carter in Crestfall, absolutely. But also there's a bit of Third Man in it, a little bit, the sort of underground, shadowy world of kind of caverns and nighttime. You know, I struggled a lot with trying to find a way to shoot London because in my experience of watching London on film, London is not an entirely photogenic city, and also when you know a city so well, it's very difficult to be objective about it. You know, you see it through the prism of your own experiences. So I had a week where I just walked around London and just had a look at things that I felt I knew, but I mean, I hadn't walked down Whitehall since I was a kid, you know, past Horse Guards Parade. I mean, just walked it, you know what I mean? Gone around St James's and in front of Buckingham Palace and all those places and I did see it in a different way, and I was awed by it in a different way. And one of the highlights for me was definitely when we closed down Whitehall and I got to walk down at 5 a.m. and it was thrilling, you know, it's an amazing, and it's totally empty, sun coming up, you know, nobody there. And you do have those moments you think, well, who else, you know, in the line of one of the lines of one of the characters in Jarhead, who else gets to see shit like this, you know? And it really felt that way. And so I was very conscious of doing that, but we had to build a lot of it, the underground stuff, you know. But I read a lot about underground London, you know, everyone here doesn't need me to tell you, but how many layers of city there are beneath our feet, you know, not just the underground, not just the sewers, you know, but, you know, tunnels big enough to drive a double-decker bus through. I mean, the stuff I saw under the city was extraordinary, you know. Up in Finsbury Park, catacombs that stretched for miles that was only accessible from one tiny little manhole on which the set that the tube crash takes place is based on entirely. We've rebuilt exactly what's there, but it's in North London. It's just not accessible. You know, and the old mail train and the waterworks and the electricity that runs through shafts. I mean, it's amazing, you know. So that was all the pleasure of it. And then something else, a sort of zeitgeisty thing also happened, which only really became clear to me sitting in the Olympic Stadium on Super Saturday, which I was lucky enough to get given free tickets by Amigo, who sponsored the Bond movie. So I got freebies with my son and my dad and watched Mo Farah win the 10,000 metres, which has to be the single greatest sporting experience of my life. And I've been to a lot of finals. I'm a big sports fan. And that was the feeling around the country in the year, which we couldn't possibly have anticipated. And also the fact that Daniel was, you know, the headline act in the Olympic ceremony. So thanks to Danny Boyle, we had a very good warm-up act for the movie, and that was very unexpected. But it definitely affected, weirdly, my confidence in the Englishness of the film in post, because I just saw it, I sat through it, and I felt good about being English in a different way. You don't need me to, not in a sort of nationalistic frenzy, just a kind of certainty that the heart of the film was in the right place. And these little things affect you.
The film could project it.
Yeah, it was okay to go big when he's running down Whitehall. It's okay to show those Union Jacks when he's standing on the roofs at the end. Of course it's okay, but you know what I mean? It's a different feeling. I felt much more confident about it.
I thought for younger directors in Britain today, that was one of the big things for me watching that movie, that you can take British landscapes, British actors, you know, British themes, British tropes, and project them, you know, through the Bond prism, of course, but essentially that's the route there. It's very British, and it plays far, far and wide. And I think maybe we're a little hesitant as a directing community to be confident enough.
Yes. Well, I mean, you know, I'm living proof of that. I mean, I had to go elsewhere initially to exercise my or to become a film director. You know, and you know, people say to me, particularly in the States, you know, did you always dream of being a film director? And I said, it for most of us was not even it wasn't even a possibility, in the way that, you know, if it were our generation in the States, we would have grown up with the idea of Spielberg and Lucas and Coppola as film school graduates and people who grew, you know, that there was a way to do it that that took you from the age of 18 straight to, you know, The Godfather or E.T., whatever. Here, you know, I remember literally the first time it ever even occurred to me that it might be possible was as a student going to see My Beautiful Laundrette and thinking, I think this was directed by a Brit, and going and looking up Stephen Frears. Now, you know, but for me, you know, not that my first love was movies. My first love initially was always the theatre, and that's how I got into it. But I think you're right that there is a definite sense that that in the movie that of a kind of renewed confidence in the English landscape, and not renewed because my confidence has always been with English actors, because that's what I've spent most of my time doing, working in my professional life with them. I've always felt confident that there's an immense depth, you know, and you know, we're very lucky that every single person we asked to play a role in this movie said yes, but I also know that even if they hadn't, there was someone coming up very close behind, because there always is in this country.
Should we have some questions from the audience? So.
You're not known as an action director, so clearly there was a learning experience for you going into this film and dealing with action. So I'd love to know a little bit about that process and how involved you could be. And also just attached to that silhouette fight in Shanghai, to me stood out in style terms as something quite different from all the other ones. Is that because you had more input, or was it just appropriate for that scenario? It was Asian in style?
I obviously had a huge input into all of the action sequences. For me, that was the big challenge, so I wanted to get my hands dirty. But at the same time, I was dependent, as one must be, on an army of people that are not the people you normally work with when you're doing a drama or a smaller scale movie. So for me, the big delights of this movie were Chris Corbould, the head of special effects, Gary Powell, head of stunts, Alex Witt, second unit director, and these were key figures. So there's no way I could possibly have done any of it without them. But you're very aware that there are very different ways of dealing with action, and the last time they all worked together was on Quantum of Solace, which was a completely different way of shooting, staging, designing action, totally different. And I was working with in a much more classical style, the stiller camera, with a great cinematographer who, along with me, cares very much about how a scene is lit and framed. And I was therefore much more, I think, probably pedestrian in my approach to action, and much more nitpicky, and probably slower, and shot on less cameras. And so there were less options in the cutting room, but it was very, very pre-designed. Having said that, it was then also dependent on a brilliant cutter, Stuart Baird, who, who I learned an immense amount from, particularly in those areas where there was action. And he cut Casino Royale along with many other great movies, and was tough, really tough on action, not only in the cutting room, but also while we were shooting it. You've lost a shot, you've missed a shot, this doesn't make sense, you need that for story, you know, and was on me all the time. Sometimes I said no, sometimes we, you know, came to blows, and sometimes, most of the time, he was right. So it's just having the ability also to say, particularly, I could come in and say, I know what I'm doing with action, get out of my way, and pretend I know what I'm doing. Or I could say, I know what I want to see, I don't know how to achieve it, that's your job. You tell me, how has this worked in the past? How have you done that? How did that go when you did it like that? So that's how one approaches it, with some level of humility, but also a very strong visual idea of what you want to see and how it differs from what they've done before. Because I think that there is a common received wisdom now, particularly in the studios, that there is and partly due to the man sitting next to me, you know, that there is a kind of, you know, with a lot of cameras and a lot of, you know, you can do it all in the cut, you know. And the truth is, in order to shoot like that, you have to be Paul Greengrass. In other words, you have to think in handheld cameras, you have to think in organic, fluid action, and cameras being placed in different positions and not lighting, so that you've got the freedom to do it. And, you know, that's how he, you know what I mean? All his movies are made in that style. You can't inherit that style. You can't sort of put a hat, like putting a hat on for a movie. Oh, I'm going to do this movie in that style. When it's that extreme, I don't think you can do it. And I think I've seen a lot of examples recently of people doing it not as well as Paul, and not as well as the Bourne movies, and there's a significant drop-off between the Bourne Ultimatum and the things that are pretending to be. So I was very aware of that, and I didn't want to go down that route. So it helped to define what we did want by being able to be clear about what we didn't. And I think that as far as the fight in the tower block in Shanghai is concerned, that was very much me. I had a notion. I wanted to do one shot. I didn't want to cover every fight in here, there, and everywhere and do it in the cut. It was a very difficult thing to get right. We had to visual effect a couple of the punches because a couple of the punches missed. We needed to tweak it constantly. We needed to speed the camera up as it pushed over the edge. We had to work it, and it ended up being probably about as much time as it would have been to cover it conventionally. But it does what I wanted it to do, which is it somehow lodges in your mind in a different way, and you feel the hits in a different way because it's not the conventional way of showing a fight. And also, it remains within the visual style of that whole sequence. That whole sequence is a slightly alienating, odd, modernist, inhuman landscape of reflections and sort of dreamlike, But it's there because Bond is coming back to being who he should be, and he's not sure yet whether he's capable of doing it. He thinks he's passed the tests. M sends him off, and we know that he hasn't. But somewhere in himself knows that he's not right yet.
Do you have another question?
You were obviously very close to your actors, and you've spoken of this before, of how you can approach in a very personal way, even in a movie of that scale. How much would you say your work in Shakespeare has influenced your transition into movies?
In Shakespeare, no more than in all theatre. It's theatre that has shaped my way of working with actors, no question about that. It's a different way to work on stage and on film. Rehearsals are different, staging is different, and you're working with the actors in a different way. For me,
talk a bit about that. What's the
the big difference is that in theatre you're constantly alerting an actor to what he is doing. Therefore, you're asking him to use his outside eye the whole time because you fundamentally want him to repeat it with variations. What he's done the previous day or a good rehearsal, that's it. Hold that now. So you're asking him to fix it in a way. On screen, you only need to ask him to do it. He only needs to do it once. You can sometimes, Kazan, who for me is the great director of actors, makes the point that it is possible, it's not desirable, but it is possible to trick an actor into giving a performance on screen. He doesn't always have to be aware of what he's doing or she is doing. And he talks about doing that with Monroe, and that ultimately it was just stopping her from being aware of what she was doing that was the key. So that's one interesting way. But for me, the job on a movie of this scale is different from the smaller movies, because in the smaller movies, you're able to create a sort of womb-like atmosphere, and basically it's a small crew, and you're in a house or a room or whatever. Being able to be intimate or give detailed direction to an actor is not that difficult. On a Bond movie, the job is to push the white noise, and there is a lot of white noise around you all the time, away long enough for them to be able to invent and be creative and relax. And when I talk about white noise, I don't just mean the endless opinions, the other drags on their time, the photo calls, the press visits, but the general public, the fact that there's constantly, interest and a sort of fascination with what's going on. And also, which I've never experienced before, trailers, which you probably experienced this, trailers being released before the movie's even finished shooting. So people already have a fixed idea of what they think the movie is before you even know what it is. And they're reviewing the trailers, and studying them in more detail than even you've studied your own footage. And that is really weird. So again, all of that stuff, just to push it away and say, just take it easy. And my thing with trailers has always been, use whatever you want that's going to make the movie look good, but don't think I'm going to put it in the movie, because a lot of the stuff in the first trailer, if you look at it now, it's just not in the film you just saw. But I just said,
It's
look,
the
use what you
reverse
need.
also. That's pretty good. I
Yeah,
better get
yeah,
that.
yeah. Sometimes that exactly. Yeah, yeah. God, that works well. Yeah, but actually that happened. There's a shot of him falling off the train on the bridge at the beginning that's in the trailer. It's so good in the trailer. I kept saying to Stuart, we've got to use that shot of it's the helicopter shot that's come, and we tried and we just couldn't make it work. It just worked in the trailer because it was held up against another shot, from another part of the movie. So the energy is all different. So anyway, for me, it's just about making space for people to remain creative, even though the movie's big.
I just wanted to say that there's a scene with Em is in the Board of Inquiry and she's trying to justify her job to a group of people who don't really have a clue what she actually does. And that's the sort of familiar feeling, I think, probably to a lot of us sometimes. And is there anything you've learned over the years when you've got an idea in your head and you're trying to get it across to someone else who's got a spreadsheet rather than, the knowledge you've gained over the years? Is there an approach you now have to get your way, I suppose, is the question?
I've got so many tricks to get my own way. I don't know where to start. So much of your job as a director is persuading people. That's it. It's just with words, talking, describing something. It all begins with that. I can't make a set. I can't, I can't make a costume, but I can describe what I see and what I feel. And it seems to me one of the things I dislike most about the way in which movies are made is there's a sort of us and them scenario. Is that you immediately take up a position of opposition because they have the money and you feel that somehow you're owed the film, you're owed the money. You're not. It's not your money, it's somebody else's. I'm not interested in whose. It could be coming out of someone's pocket or it could be coming out of the pocket of a multinational. I don't really care. But they have a right to know how their money is being spent. And if you cannot describe how it's being spent, you don't deserve to spend it. You have to be able to explain why something has to be that way. And you have to be passionate and clear about it and focused. That is your job, Then you keep everyone who's within your circle away from all those pressures, away from the justification, and you make the time for them to be able to relax and do their jobs properly. But you are the head of the ship, and sometimes it's your job to be tough, and sometimes it's your job to be persuasive, and sometimes it's your job, and most of the time your job, to be the person that is bitched about in the pub afterwards. A lot of the time, I think one of the things I found most difficult in this movie is that there's an enormous pressure when there's a big stunt, let's say, a huge explosion. Everyone's like, it worked, everyone's excited and they're all jazzed about it. And to have the strength at that point to pull back and say, yeah, it worked, but did I like it? Is it what I wanted? Does it tell the story properly? Is the actor in the right place? Is the camera in the right place? And if the answer is no, to have the courage to go, well, there's 200 people looking at it and go, we're doing it again. And they're all looking at you like they want to kill you, including the actors. Sometimes you just have to take it on the chin, but you have to stand your ground. So there are moments when you do say no and you do have a little, throw a bit of a wobbly. I think the moment of greatest panic for me on this entire process, however, was the moment on the evening of the premiere when I couldn't find my black suit. That was that's the moment I really lost it. But I think it was 2 years build up to that point.
Was there anything in the movie you'd like to have done but you couldn't because for budget reasons?
Well, I think there are lots of people in this room who will tell you that I only see what's wrong with the film and not what's right. Of course, I don't want to tell you because I would only draw attention to it. But there are many things that I think I could have done better. There's some, I consider bum notes, moments that rhythmically seem rushed, moments that I needed a transitional shot that I didn't have. But it tends to be details. I don't think I gave up anything major that I think, that has lingered with me to the point where when I get to it in the movie, I think I wish we'd kept on to the scene with the rats, for example, which I cut halfway through. There was a rat scene in the Dead City. But we cut it, and I was right. I think we were right to cut it. So I think we made the right calls. Sometimes that's not the case. I still see American Beauty, and there were 2 little scenes I cut, tiny scenes, like 20-second scenes, and I still wish they were there. And I cut them because the studio said, we haven't got the money, we haven't got the time, we need to save a day. And I regret that even now. So, I think on this one, there's nothing major.
Have we got time for one more? Yeah.
I don't wish to be too feminist, but it's basically gone back to Bond misogyny. I mean, it's sort of become, we've lost
our famous woman at the top, M. And we've got Eve going back to being Miss Moneypenny, and sorry, the other people, the other women in it are very much Bond's playthings. And is that a sadness to you that it's reverted to type?
That's a pretty bleak way of looking at it.
I want Judi Dench back. She's one.
Well, you can't have her. She popped her clogs, you know. You just have to miss the next two. Basically, I think it's very important to say that Moneypenny is not back there because she's just the little girl sat behind her. She's chosen to be there, but there's nothing that's to say that she's not going to come straight out from behind that desk in the next movie and be something completely different from what you usually expected. So I was very conscious of that, and I think it's a perfectly valid question. And I don't think all the women in the movie are Bond's playthings, as you say. There's one character who dies during the course of it, but the other two, Eve, Moneypenny, and M, as played by Judy, are incredibly strong women, and there's nothing to say that they can't be women of that strength in the next movie. So I don't think we've set up anything that's too depressing. At least I hope not.
And do you come back for the second one, the next movie? I gotta ask.
That's a low blow, isn't it, from somebody like Greengrass? Just because you did too doesn't mean I have to do it. If I could do what you did with your last one and make it better than the one you did before, then maybe. I think that I'll say to you what I've said to everyone, which is that I really felt like I put everything I ever wanted to put into a Bond movie into this movie, and that if felt like I could do that again, then yes. But if not, then I think it's someone else's turn, and I think that's the fun of it, and I think that's why we have to embrace these things. It's time for a rebirth and a regeneration of energy, and I will be first in line.
Well, I think we can all say thank you very much, Sam. Absolutely brilliant movie, and an inspiration to all directors, and British directors particularly. Well done, mate.
Thank you very much.